Hi, and thanks for downloading from Digital Mindfulness. This is episode 54. Welcome to the show, where I'm delighted to have as my guest this week, Joe Hollier. Joe is the co-founder of the Light Phone, and along with his business partner, Kawai Tang, you'll hear the story of how Joe created the Light Phone, which is a phone the size of a credit card and designed to help you reduce digital distraction. I hope you enjoy this fascinating talk with Joe Hollier.
They asked me to be in it, and I was just kind of curious and said, yeah, sure, this sounds totally different than everything I'm doing. And actually, when I joined the incubator, and my co-founder Kaiwei did as well, I realized sort of on a deeper level what was going on in the technology world. I think I was sort of able to be a little bit oblivious to it as solely a consumer. And, they were teaching us how to engineer products. I think they ultimately wanted us to build apps. They were teaching us how to engineer them to use people's vulnerabilities against them. And, they were preaching that, the amount of hours a user spends with your product every day equals success, because then you can advertise to them. And the people that were making the watch came in and told us about how, they were trying to save our lives and bring back our humanity. And I just didn't believe any of it. And so the Light Phone, I sort of thought of it maybe 2 or 3 weeks into the program. And I think it was actually a reaction to that sort of deep dive into the technology world. And it just so happens that Kaiwei came from a product design and development background, and he had been making phones for 10 years, starting with the Motorola Razr. I'm not sure if you remember that one, but he had seen the sort of evolution into smartphones, and I guess he just gotten fed up with the lack of innovation, and he felt that they weren't really solving a problem. They were just kind of making it a little bigger, adding a couple of features, but they weren't actually thinking about the end user. So he actually quit his job, got a second master's in human-centered design, and never planned on making another phone. And when I told him about the Light Phone, he just was like, wow, this is going to be a long road. Let's do it.
So with this whole idea behind the Light Phone, which I think is absolutely fascinating, do you see it as part of a kind of wider trend that this is generally what people are starting to ask for now?
Well, I guess when I initially started it, like being that sort of from this art background, I mean, part of it was I did see it as a tool that could help, but I really saw it also as this tool that could almost encourage or inspire in the way that a sculpture might. It was sort of an object that was utilitarian, but it also had a very strong idea. And I'll say, like, I sort of thought pretty closed-minded in terms of, trying to inspire other designers to go find influence on the weekend. But as we've been working on this for the last year and a half, the reaction and sort of backlash to technology in general has only gotten infinitely larger. Like, I went from seeing an article once a week to multiple times a day, and I really do think there is a much larger macro.
Yeah, well, I think for me, it's really interesting how the community of designers and technologists and engineers, etc., are coming together to use technology to overcome this problem of digital distraction.
Yeah, no, completely. I'm definitely seeing it a little bit, but I guess I felt like there was a big gap, or at least an opportunity to try something like this. But I mean, we went into it not really knowing how it would be perceived. I kind of took it not so business practical because of the nature of the program. It was a sort of safe place to play with ideas that, didn't, if it didn't come into a real company, it was just going to be a great learning project, and then you could take it on as a portfolio piece. But the fact that it's resonated and becoming a viable product has been, a blessing for us, I think.
So that was the idea behind the Light Phone, but I'm really interested. How is the audience now actually receiving this?
Well, I guess so. When I had this initial idea of like, how can we get people away from our smartphones? We bring them everywhere because it's our phone, and they've kind of hidden this computer in the phone device, and I almost felt like we were tricked. So I immediately started giving people flip phones before it really was a light phone, and that was a solid idea. And what I realized was, one, there's this initial anxiety every time someone goes out by themselves without their smartphone, but that everyone ended up having a huge relief once they get past that point of FOMO, or what they might be missing out on, or tapping their pocket a million times. But yet they had this huge relief, and no one used their device at all. So we gave the users flip phones, and I think throughout all of our testing, I mean, it wasn't the most comprehensive testing ever, but I would say there was about 24 participants. I think there was maybe one phone call the entire time. So what it taught us was that, the value of the light phone wasn't in what the light phone did. It could almost be a blank brick, but it was about that peace of mind and that sort of encouragement to leave the smartphone behind. So that's really how we went about designing the object and stripping it down and choosing the form factor of a credit card, the sort of universal ID that everyone carries.
So are you surprised yourself at just how well everything has gone and the interest in the device?
Yes, I mean, there's been a lot of things from, one, meeting Kaiwei, like the biggest coincidence ever. And there's been a lot of those sort of like perfect match coincidences that have been falling in place for me to the point that it almost feels out of my control sometimes. Like, wow, maybe this is bigger than me. Our software team, coincidentally, they were working on this software for AT&T for another product that, like, out of the blue completely fell apart, and they stumbled upon our Kickstarter the week that their licensing with AT&T ended. And I had actually been following them because the software was so applicable to the light phone, and the fact that they mutually loved it now are our software team to a lot of other people we've met along the way. It's been unrealistic how well it's going.
And what is demand like for distraction-free devices outside the US as well?
Well, we actually haven't shipped any light phones yet. We're not going to begin shipping till June, but we've seen interest in pre-sold phones to 70 different countries. I would say there's stronger interest in some countries, obviously, than others, but Europe in particular, Canada, and actually Asia was kind of the one that really surprised me. China in particular, I didn't expect such an overwhelming response from China.
So obviously, in addition to the light phone, which I'm sure you think is a great device, I'm wondering what other devices are you seeing now in the same kind of distraction-free area that you're particularly excited about?
Well, maybe I'm just weird in that the technology doesn't excite me as much, but there is a lot of technology coming out that I think speaks to the power of the movement, and I guess that is exciting. I would say most notably, the one that's getting the most attention is this phone by this company called Punkt, PUNKT. I believe it's a German company, and Jasper Morrison, the industrial designer, is pretty well known designer, and that's probably why they're getting a lot of attention. And they basically built a phone that does a little bit more than the light phone. It's a little bit bigger. It's similar to like a Nokia brick phone of the past, but much nicerly designed. And it's just a simplified phone. It does do text messages. It does have a contact book and calendar and other sort of notes, but the difference, I guess, between them and all the other sort of simple phones, because there are a couple of others, is that they're really saying ditch your smartphone forever. And I think we have an interesting perspective in that we're saying, it's the right phone for the job. Sometimes it's helpful to have my smartphone to bring to work, but at the same time, I don't want to bring my smartphone to the beach. So actually, I think we're providing this very unique experience of like full disconnection is how we say it. Like we actually want you to not use our phone at all, even if you go out with it. Hopefully you don't make any phone calls. So I think that's sort of interesting, but there's, I guess, some of the other products that are maybe not directly a phone, or like there's a couple of jewelry companies that are coming out with a similar idea of filtering, and a woman could leave her smartphone in her purse and we will sort of filter a little bit to that degree. But actually, I think what excites me is probably more along the lines of Chris's program, in which, it's people coming together and, being inspired to actually step away from their sort of daily routines and talk about these things in a new way.
So you said previously that the light phone adapts to where you are, that it gives you that feeling of both disconnection and connection at the same time. But I'm wondering if you can just touch a little bit more on exactly what the phone does and doesn't do.
Yes, so currently it's limited to only phone calls. I mean, technically the light phone is a smartphone at its core. It runs an Android operating system. It has a computer chip in there. So we are maybe going to explore like a pager-like idea in the future, so that maybe one or two of your contacts, say your wife, would be able to page you some sort of message. But we really felt that texting was an inferior means of communication. And I imagined myself at the park, and it's like, okay, maybe I want to meet up with my friend Connor. I might shoot him a text because it seems less intrusive. But then really my mind is not just immediately back in the park. I'm sort of in this anxious waiting for a response. And, that dialogue might take a couple of minutes, but with a couple of messages back and forth, when I could have called him, kept my head up and received an answer much quicker and actually heard his voice. And so that was an intentional limitation.
So did the inspiration for the light phone, did that come from your own frustrations of not being able to disconnect when you wanted to, or rather the anxiety for you that came from being hyperconnected?
I would completely agree with that. I would say it was a little bit more of a retrospective. After I had the idea, I realized that, I come from a skateboarding background, and I never brought my smartphone skateboarding. And maybe that's one of the reasons that skateboarding was I considered it like, it got all of my anxiety out. And I thought it was because of the physical activity and the sort of falling around. But there was also that separation. But my girlfriend was always telling me, you're going to break your leg. You don't remember my phone number, which fortunately that never happened. But I do recall that at the end of the day, I would have a great day skateboarding, but I would want to connect mostly with her to, grab dinner or grab a drink. And so it was sort of like, I remember that being a hurdle, and I didn't know her phone number, so I couldn't just ask someone to borrow a phone. And then on the other side, I remembered, the feeling I had when my phone died, or when I was on an airplane and, you had no internet and you were just looking out the window, and being from that sort of art background, those hours of solitude working on a piece of art, that was sort of my happiest moments. It was, my happy place. And then I jumped into this tech world and it was emails all day long, which it just, I definitely realized that it very much related to my past life. In that regard. But I would say it was kind of like I had the idea, and then as I thought about it and how I would use it, that's when I realized, like, wow, I've actually sort of always embraced this a little bit.
So, Joe, where can people find out more about you, your work, and especially where can people find out about the light phone?
Yeah, so the light phone website, thelightphone.com, it's a work in progress, but you can learn more about the product itself. And then also there's a blog, which I'm sort of trying to catch up to date with the Kickstarter updates, but it's on the Medium. And if you go to the Light Phone website, there's a link at the bottom called Process. And that's where we're sort of exploring some of the ideas behind the phone. And another aspect we didn't touch upon today is actually a mission we have to give some transparency to the manufacturing process, because You know, on one side, it's about becoming more conscious of our time and attention, but I think the other side is that, you know, not only do they want us to buy, I mean, they want us to buy a new smartphone pretty much every single year at these unrealistic prices that I think we're just consuming so much and not appreciating enough. So, sort of telling the story of why a simple phone should cost $100 and how the supply chain involves thousands of people, and our expectations to get things for free is not really based in reality and never really going to satisfy us. So trying to, you know, put those two stories together is really something we believe in.
That is a really good point. And just, by way of, as a finishing question, I think this is really interesting, this whole idea of sustainability, because I, for one, get so frustrated where you're kind of compelled every single year to update your phone and to buy new hardware, and it costs about £1,000 or $1,000, and you're contracted for, ever such a long time. And this is something that you were saying that you're going to design into the phone, making the light phone sustainable.
But what happens with us is, you know, we're releasing a phone that in people's mind, they compare it to like a $20 feature phone, which is actually subsidized by, you know, those exact contracts, the light phone's unlocked. But the way in which people think this phone should only cost $10 because maybe they see something on Alibaba that's, you know, a $20 phone, which, you know, I bought many of those, and there's lots of reasons why those are inferior phones. But I think, you know, I can't say off the top of my head an exact number, but I imagine that a smartphone should, if we were to, you know, make them more fair, would cost the price of a car or something along those lines. Uh, it's just like we take it so for granted as, oh, it's just our phone, it's just a smartphone, I need a new one. But really, there's these sort of, you know, crazy complex products that involve so many people to get produced, and just the side effects of not only that labor but also the waste of, you know, just sort of getting a new one every year. It's unsustainable.
Well, look, Joe, it was great speaking to you, and thanks for giving up some of your time to spend it here with us at Digital Mindfulness.